Welcome to Simply Blossom, the podcast dedicated to life's transitional journey with your host, Kay Perkins. Hello, friends. This is Kay Perkins, your host, and welcome to episode 5, Authentic Beauty. Today we are going to unpack beauty. What does beauty really mean? What was God's true intent for beauty? That word, a definition that we can use throughout a lifetime that has been spun to mean something totally different by social media. In my search to discover what beauty was, it led me to Psalms 139. When I read it, it was like, oh my God, it's just like so awesome. And I would suggest that you guys read it too, and read it with a new set of eyes. It's a familiar scripture, but it ties beauty to being fearfully and wonderfully made. And in the past, I've always wondered, what the heck does that mean? Why would you be fearful and wonderful at the same time? What sense did that make? I had to start with defining what the world meant by beauty and what God meant by beauty. Dictionary.com defines beauty as a combination of qualities such as shape, color, form that pleases the aesthetic senses, especially the sight. And so from there, I was trying to determine what authentic beauty was. So I looked up the word authentic, and Merriam-Webster defines it as worthy of acceptance or belief, as conforming to or based on a fact, conforming to an original, so as to reproduce essential features. What does that mean when you put that together with the world's definition of beauty? It doesn't even go together, because the world paints this picture of makeup and fashion, and if you're beautiful on the outside, it doesn't matter what you look like on the inside. But if you're your authentic self, you have to be comfortable with who you are and where you are in your walk in life. So how can you do both? Like, not saying I have anything against makeup or anything, but I much rather have a love for me and see the beauty of the internal than to look great on the outside and be falling apart on the inside. So in order for us to get to the present, we have to focus on what God's intent was for beauty. How do you know that you are fearfully and wonderfully made? Well, I began to research what several authors had to say about being fearfully and wonderfully made. One author describes how fearfully refers to how God created us to recognize wrongdoing and to seek redemption, at least eventually. And we may not always start out that way. For me, I had to get to the point where the price was too high for what I wanted to ignore God's approval. I wanted God's approval more so than I ever wanted things. And that's where that redemptive quality just kicked in. It's that moral compass that guides you along the way. Not to say that you're doing something wrong or you're intentionally doing things, but sometimes we get so focused and driven on meeting goals and getting to where we want to be that sometimes we overlook that little feeling, that little voice that's saying, you really shouldn't be doing this. There's a different way, there's a better way, and we want the fast way. And so we just move forward in what we're doing. And often we confuse this feeling of wanting to be redeemed unto God as a feeling of wanting to be accepted by men. try to do everything that we can to win man's approval, when in fact what we've been looking for the whole time is God's approval and acceptance, trying to fill the God-sized hole that was left for relationship with him. This opens the door to rejection because men don't accept us, and it takes us off our course to destiny. The rejection and the pain of rejection changes our views of ourselves. It makes us question, are we really who God says we are? Is our character flawed? Is there something wrong with us that these people won't accept us for who we are? And then we begin to modify our personalities and our attitudes and basically the essentials of what God has created us to be. And we often become something that we don't even recognize. It takes us further away from God than we were ever intended to be. We look for acceptance from people who may have never experienced it themselves. How can you give something that you've never had? We're putting people in a place that they were never meant to be in. God's love is true acceptance. And when you find acceptance in God, it doesn't matter if anybody else accepts you or believes you. The rejection is not as painful because the one who created you and made you the way you are accepts you for who you are. And that becomes enough. And in that alone, there's a beauty. As you look at wonderfully made or wonderfully, one author described it as we were not designed by happenstance. Every inch of us was engineered. There was a specific blueprint. We were not an accident. We were not a chemistry experiment on the beach. We are made on purpose. We were special. We are handcrafted to be exactly who we are. And there's a beauty in that every cell was designed specifically for us to make us function at our optimal levels. We were made and built to heal ourselves, regenerate cells. We are just a wonderful creation. And it's just beautiful. If you just look at how much care that he put into making us who we are. That beauty alone is enough to just leave us in awe of his greatness and his goodness and his love towards us. So repeat after me. God made me special. He took time to personalize me inside and out for greatness. Now, doesn't that feel great to say that? That you were intentional. You were not an accident. You were that perfect mix of character and personality, and you were called for a specific purpose in life. It's just amazing just to even have that concept. Out of all the possibilities, out popped you, this perfectly imperfect vessel, ready to do amazing things. Now that I can clearly get behind. It drives me to be who he has called me to be. I have an expectation of what's next. What is he going to unfold? What is he going to show me? How am I going to change the world? It drives me as it should drive you. I remember when I first got saved and joined the church, and there was a woman who mentored me and loved me through me being me. And her husband used to always say, when that girl figures out who she is, people are going to be in trouble. She is going to take the world by storm. I used to not believe what they were saying because I had this view of who I was, this picture painted in my mind. And the picture that I had painted in my mind didn't coincide with what God says about me and who he says I am. The love that he has for me is just amazing to me. As I began to study and find myself in the Word, it began with a simple study of what does God or who does God say that I am. I meditated on that, and from that, like self-love began to sprout. And not in an arrogant way, but in a way that I valued myself because God took the time to create me. And so I began to see myself in a different light. I appreciated myself as God's handiwork. And as I began to love me, I was able to love people beyond their faults. Before, all I could see was their faults and what ultimately wrong with them. Now when I look at them, I see, okay, there's potential. And God intended them to be this way, and they're here. And it's up to me sometimes, and maybe it may be somebody else's assignment to get them from point A to point B. But my actual responsibility in this whole thing is to love you where you are, whether I'm the person that gets you to the next destination or not. Which brings me to my next point. When you're fearfully and wonderfully made and you rest in that, worship and praise is always on your lips. You're not so quick to curse someone. Even if you want to, a positive thing rolls out of your mouth. You recognize the beauty in God's creation, and you begin to speak life to things that other people have spoken death to. You begin to pray for the manifestation of the things that God intended for their lives, and to hope that they discover it in their journey, and help them to point things out, to smell the flowers, to see the beautiful things, to see what we have and focus on the good things that we have versus the things that we don't have or we're needing or we're lacking. When you appreciate what you have, God gives you more. One of the biggest questions that I had when I was trying to find my way was, what was my value? What was my purpose? Was I significant? And I questioned that so often as I walked through this life. I was always self-condemning. I could look in the mirror and I could see 20 things wrong before I could see something right. I always focused on what I could do better or what I did wrong. I never took the time to praise myself for things that I did well. I was always looking for people to accept me and tell me that, oh, you did a great job, that pat on the head. And once they approved of what I did, I was able to say, okay, I guess I did something right. And that was never in God's intent to have you look for a co-signer. The only co-signer you need is God. If He told you to do it, you do it to His glory. All He expects is your best. Your best is not somebody else's best. We often just get off into comparison. When you're walking in God's beauty, authentic beauty, you don't compare yourself with anyone else because there's only one you. You're fearfully and wonderfully made. You are unique. God made you on purpose. He made you to do it your way, as Frank Sinatra always says. But you're not supposed to do it your way without Him. It's a guided tour. We do everything with Him and through Him to give Him glory. And once you get that concept, you don't really need to people please anymore. You're okay. You know God's got this. You know He's happy with what you're doing. And it's awesome. Like, it's such a freeing feeling to know that you just don't have to worry about what people think about you, at least not in a way that their judgment matters. You always want to do the right things, and you do listen to some people's opinions of you, people that you value, you trust, people that have your best interests at heart and that are walking a similar life as you do. But listening to the haters or, any worrying about what other people say and think about you.